This is Gene Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 264, originally aired March 28th, 2017. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Today, we're going to be talking about a complementary technique, TAT, Tapas Acupressure Technique, and do a little compare and contrast with regular tapping that you are used to. Before we jump into the conversation, two quick reminders. First of all, if you have not done so already, we have a free 10-part guide to help you to use tapping to eliminate self-sabotage in your daily life so you can take the actions that you want to take easily and confidently. The guide is absolutely free of charge. All you got to do is go to tappingqa.com, click on the big blue button. If you happen to be listening to this audio in the website, in the right-hand column up at the top, there's a blue button. Click on that, and we will start sending you those parts every few days so they're doled out in such a way that you're not overwhelmed by the information and you can use each little bit. Also, if you would like to support the podcast, just go to tappingqa.com/support. There's lots of really awesome gifts for everybody who supports the podcast. We are 75% of the way to our goal as of this recording, to start transcribing all of the interviews so you get something beyond just the audio. You also get a chance to read through it if that is the way that you digest information more easily. tappingqa.com/support. If you're on the website, there's a link right above the player. Today, my conversation is with Tapas Fleming. Tapas came up with an acupressure technique based on her experience as an acupuncturist trying to find something that was useful and powerful for her clients. In preparation for this interview, I actually purchased her training manual, and the thing that I found most fascinating about the protocol is how well constructed and organized it is. That there are a number of parts that you work through one at a time that give you the opportunity to think about the issue that you're dealing with in an organized, systematic way. And even if you are not going to use the technique itself, the way the process is structured is a really useful and helpful process for anybody who's doing any of the techniques. So if you are never going to do her particular technique, you can take her structure and apply it to your tapping. So in this conversation, we talk about kind of a compare and contrast between what she does and what us tappers normally do, and the structure of the process. And so you can see the ways that you can start integrating it into your work. So here is my conversation with Tapas. Tell me a little bit about how you found your way to creating and using the technique.
Okay, I was super interested in clearing the emotional stuff from my childhood because I really felt the constraints of it as I got to be growing up. Mm-hmm. And so I was always looking for some effective way to do that. And then after a while, got older, got pregnant with twins. They died. And one of my friends said, why don't you try this? Try out some acupuncture to help you out. So I did, and eventually became an acupuncturist. And then I had a baby. And one of my friends said, oh, you got to try this thing called NAET. And she said, I helped a baby get over colic by having it on the mother's lap, and I tried that. I learned it and found it to be like effective but really complicated. So I was looking for something super effective for my clients, and one of the things that happened was I was taking a nap on my acupuncture table on a slow day, and when I woke up, I had this thought with me of all the meridians joining and entering the brain at this point that's on either side of the nose, just above the upper inner corner of each eye. And that because I was using that same meridian in doing the work I learned, the NAET, which clears allergies, I thought, ooh, maybe this will help the allergies clear up faster for my clients. So I tried it out. It worked. And I just developed it from there. One of the really significant things that happened was I was working with a woman who was allergic to salt. And after we were done working, she said, I have been in therapy for 9 years. She was about 57. She said, and I was sexually abused as a child, never got over it, and this is the first time that I can think of that whole period of my life, and there's no emotional charge on it. And I was like, wow. So what happened was her allergy to salt cleared up as we worked together, because she went on to tell me, I was sexually abused in a bar, and afterwards, each time I was given a bag of potato chips. So it was like the bell went off in my head. Ding! Oh my gosh, the salt of the potato chips and the trauma all became no for her. And by doing this work, not only did her allergy clear up, but the emotional charge from all that trauma cleared up. And because I had this long history of really wanting to clear up my childhood stuff, I was super excited. And I had spent many years of my life like crying and pounding on mattresses and trying to get it all out and to clear up stuff. And it just didn't work. It just made me better at crying and screaming and getting things out. But the problem still stayed there. So what happened with this was this new approach that the actual core of something just dissolved, and then there was no more emotion.
And so then, I guess for the uninitiated, what would be a quick description of the process itself? And then most of the folks listening to this are really familiar with the tapping protocols, kind of a compare and contrast between what you're doing and what people would be familiar with in the basic recipe of EFT.
So in this, you're actually just holding one pose. With one hand, you're using your thumb and ring finger and touching above the upper inner corner of each eye, and you're putting your middle finger just between and slightly above your eyebrows, midline, and your other hand goes at the base of your skull. And that's the TAT pose. TAT, by the way, is for Tapas Acupressure Technique. So that's the TAT pose. And then you're putting... what's different about this is, for starters, we're making a great big intention that our healing is on behalf of ourselves, each other, our families, our ancestors, all beings involved, all beings who'd like to benefit. It'll happen in a way that's safe and easy. So it's a big intention that includes all of those beings. And then what we do is we create what I call a pot. It just means the place we're putting all the things we want to heal. And it can be a whole bunch of mixed stuff like, I woke up in the middle of the night really angry. And I feel kind of nervous about talking to my boss about a raise today. And I've got a little bit of tightness in my abdomen. So you can just take a big mishmash of stuff and throw it in a pot, and then we go through the steps of TAT, which include, some of the things it includes are that it happened, it's over, I can relax now. It includes forgiveness. It includes communicating silently with everyone involved. It includes making positive intentions, I call wow statements. All of this while we're in the pose, and then an integration. So that's it really in short. So what's different about this? Obviously, no tapping, one pose, but there's no having to even talk about it. You can do the whole thing silently. You don't have to dig for any what's behind the problem or what's the core problem. You don't have to go one step further into any what's behind it or why. And the other thing that people say about TAT is that it really puts you into a deep inner place of of peace and like you've been meditating for a while instantly. So that's the big picture. What I know is different.
So as I was in getting ready for our conversation today, I was spending some time poking through the manual. And one of the things that I really appreciate, like how comprehensive each of the steps are laid out with this very specific intention of giving you a protocol that kind of leads you through those different steps. I am guessing, and I could be wrong, I'm guessing that these steps didn't spring from your head fully formed. What was the process of finding your ways to these pieces of forgiveness and integration? And what was that iterative process? How did you discover the things that would be most useful to use? And what did that look like?
I really appreciate that question. Thanks. First of all, I studied yoga for a long time. I have a background in that. And one of the saints from that lineage says, Patanjali says, if you want to attain freedom, to contemplate the opposites. So the first couple of steps of TAT are, it happened. That's the first step, because people just don't allow themselves to get it, that it happened.
Right.
You know, like if they're in a car crash, it's like, no, hold it out there. So that's the first step. And then the opposite of that is it happened. Basically, it happened. It's over. And I don't have to resonate, identify, or connect with that anymore. That is the opposite condition, because implied in it happened is it happened and I'm messed up. I'm not okay. So those are the opposites. So that's the really at the core of it. Those are the first two steps I came up with. And at first it was, it happened, it's over, and I'm okay. When an individual contemplates the opposites, they are not stuck. You're not stuck in this or that. It immediately puts you in a place of, I'm the witness of this or that. And you're just not stuck. So that was the first thing. And then the forgiveness statements, the importance of those came to me by a comment by Larry Nims, the guy who founded BSFF, Be Set Free Fast. He was just talking to me about the importance of forgiveness, and I thought, oh, I could include that, because non-forgiveness holds us and others stuck. And I have a specific definition of forgiveness, which is that it means accepting we were doing the best we could in that moment. That's what it means. So important to include that of forgiving ourselves and others so we're not stuck. And also people don't forgive God. Like, God, how could you? How could you have done this to me? So that had to get included too. That came over time. There's a step in there about all the places where something is stored being healed. That came to me because I was working with a woman who had a horrible relationship with her mother, and her mother died in her arms, my client's arms. I could see in front of my client, there was this big, like, empty space in front of her where she had been holding her mother, and it was like this vacant space. So I thought, oh, we got to heal the space. So I just told her to do that, and I could see it fill in with, like, light. And then I started looking at other people and myself, of course, and realized that we have places where we hold things stuck. And plus there are places in the outside world that trigger us. You know, like if you've been in a car accident, every time you drive by there, your body goes cringe. Or you see a guy who was like someone who yelled at you when you were a child. Maybe your neck hurts or something if you were hit in the neck, you know. So there are all of these places in our minds, bodies, and lives where things get stuck. So I thought, well, we'll just address all of that. Then another piece that was there that came back from when I was in the acupuncture days was I was doing muscle testing back then. And I felt like, okay, there's not only what's manifest in this moment, but there are all these different origins to it. Like there's maybe what happened, 3 generations back and this allergy started, or there's what happened to this person when they were a child and they fell off a roof, and it all ended up like smearing together and ending up as this this pattern in their life. So I used to identify several of those, where they started, several of the origins. So I would do a search in using muscle testing and the genetic lineage on the mother's side or the father's side and this lifetime and, what century it was and blah, blah. And that just get a few details so I could sort of cook up a resonance, you could say, with what was happening now. And then one day I went, you know what? My clients are not coming to me to be entertained by the stories. They just want to get over something. So maybe I could just say, all the origins of this are healing now. And sure enough, that worked. The integration step, there are 3 poses to that. There's the TAT pose, and then switching hands, and then our fingertips around our ears. I was just aware that there are parts of our bodies and parts of our being that in trauma become disconnected. They become isolated. And so this was a way to create connection and communication, because in families typically say there's heart problems. Well, this is a way to directly talk to your heart and have your heart be connected with the whole rest of your body and communicate everything that it needs and wants to the whole rest of your body and the whole rest of your being. There's one other thing, too. We do a lot of talking to the parts of an individual, like the parts of us that are feeling this, the parts of us that are our heart, and different parts. And what's unique about TAT from talking to a lot of psychotherapists is that we're really totally accepting and forgiving and nice to all these parts, and just give them new information hey, that happened, and you can relax now, you can join me in the here and now. And they go, oh, okay, cool, great. And it's just this very sweet kind of effortless integration that happens.
A number of questions kind of arise as you kind of pop your way through those things.
Yeah.
The first question I have is, and I think you did a really good job of, spending a little time dealing with definition of forgiveness. Mm-hmm. For me, forgiveness is my decision to no longer be emotionally tied to this thing in the past. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes people, like you rightly pointed out, come to this sense of forgiveness with, if I'm forgiving you, I'm saying it's okay, or I'm giving you a pass, or I'm giving you permission to do it again because I have forgiven it and we're letting it go. Mm-hmm. When you're working with folks, before you start, do you spend any time reframing what you mean by forgiveness when you're working with them to help them see it another way? And I guess the second piece of that is, are you ever concerned as going through this process that you get to forgiveness too quickly and it's not a useful tool because they are not there yet, because they don't have embraced another definition of the term?
I love your questions. Thank you. Usually I ask people to get TAT 101, which is a downloadable booklet and a video. So they've got all the explanations before we start.
Okay, great.
That's the easiest.
Yep.
But the other thing is, it isn't too fast. And the other thing I explain is you don't have to feel like, oh gosh, I really forgive you. It has only the intention, I forgive you and wish you love, happiness, and peace. That's it. It has the same emotional focus or intention or strength as if you are doing a Google search and you just type something in.
Right.
It's that uninvolved. Yeah.
As you are doing kind of the parts work inside of this, are you doing some sort of parts inventory before you start? Are you just doing generically all parts? How do you address something like that when it can be showing up parts in multiple different ways with a particular issue? And like you said, you're doing kind of this basket of issues all at once.
Yeah. I just say, okay, now we're going to talk to all the parts that are involved with all the stuff you just told me.
Gotcha. As you're doing this sort of work, are there particular issues, particular experiences, particular things that you have found are particularly sticky in their inability to be released as you're doing this sort of work?
There's one thing that comes up, and it isn't sticky until it's recognized, and that is that people in order to solve their problems, often of being abused, leave their bodies. So as soon as we recognize, this might be happening for you, then we specifically include talking to the parts of a person that have left their body or tend to, and then that covers it.
Gotcha. So there's just kind of a sense of a disassociation as a way of protecting themselves because of the type of trauma they've experienced.
Yeah.
In poking through the material and in the back and forth that we had over email beforehand, I know you have a very strong spiritual sense, and there's some places that God is invoked in this. What about a person who is coming from a place where that's not part of their worldview and that's not part of their understanding? Does it disqualify them from doing this work, or how is it adopted or molded for someone who's coming in with that disposition?
Well, it's real easy. I have a choice. They can either use statements that include God or that don't. And when I ask them which they prefer, in my feelings and in my reality, whatever they want is fine. And if they ask about it, a question sort of like you did, I say, what's doing the healing is, I like to say, whatever makes flowers grow.
Okay.
So whatever you call that, that's fine. And we don't even have to give it a name. And this works great with animals, and they don't have any beliefs about that. So no problem.
Being a person from the outside, I don't know all the ins and outs of all of this, that I have been aware of your stuff for a little while, but really just dove into it in preparing for our interview today. What are parts of what you're doing that you feel are unique or unusual that at first glance maybe someone might not notice?
A person doesn't have to talk about anything, think about anything, or figure anything out, and they don't have to relive anything. And in fact, if something is so awful that they don't even want to have one thought of it, they can stick it in a box and lock the box, and we can just work on what's in the box, or they can work on that themselves.
Thank you very much for just spending a little time today talking about it.
Sure, it's been a total pleasure. Thank you, Jean.
Really interesting way to think about the healing process. I would encourage you to really check out Tapas' work. Like I said, her work will give you a great framework for using a tapping session, even if you don't choose to use the procedure and protocol that she uses as far as the pressure that's being applied to your physical body. For more information about her and her work, all you need to do is go to tappingqandapodcast.com, click on the link for episode 264, or inside of your podcast app, if you're listening to this on a smartphone or a tablet, just go into the show notes and you will see a link and a way to contact Tapas and learn more about the work that she's doing. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so by going to tappingqanda.com/support. It's a great way to help us improve the show and do some more awesome things as we move forward. If you have a question, a comment, a topic, something that you'd like to see us cover in the future, please let us know. You can always email me directly at Gene, Gene, at tappingqanda.com. If you happen to be listening to us in the Tapping Q&A app, which you can get at tappingqandapodcast.com, all you need to do is click on the contact link, and in there you can send me an email message, or you can even leave me a little voicemail. If you haven't downloaded our app yet, you can do that free of charge at tappingqandapodcast.com. In addition to having access to the entire archive of audios, you also get most of the tapping scripts. We're adding more of them every single week. And once we are in the position to having the transcripts, in addition to having them on the website, they will also be on the app, so you will have access to them wherever you go. tappingqandapodcast.com. You can listen to the show in iTunes, in Stitcher, in TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and the Google Music Play Store. We are still the #1 tapping EFT podcast in the Google Music Play Store because we are still the only tapping EFT podcast there. Wherever you listen to the show, leave us a rating, leave us a review. For the Tapping Q&A podcast, this is Gene Monterastelli. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye. The Tapping Q&A podcast is copyright Gene Monterastelli Tapping Q&A 2016. All views expressed by guests are those of the guests and not necessarily of Gene Monterastelli or Tapping Q&A.